Good afternoon and welcome to our quarterly pricing webinar. For the next 30 minutes or so, I'll be talking about how prices have moved in the motor and home insurance markets in the first quarter of the year. There will be a Q&A session at the end, so please feel free to log any questions that you may have in the chat, and I'll attempt to answer them when we get to the end. So just a little bit of an intro. At Pearson Ham Group, our mission is to help our clients improve performance through better pricing. And one of the ways that we do this within insurance is to provide market price tracking and insights services. In terms of the overview of that, accuracy is the most important thing to us. It's really important that we're able to rely on the data to be able to inform our pricing and trading decisions. So it's key to us that we do all that we need to cleanse the data, to make sure outliers are removed, so that what we report is a true reflection of changes in the market. We have a range of different services and service levels. There's a bit of an overview here which provides some detail as to what we can provide, either on a daily basis, where we are tracking prices every day and creating insights the following day for those more dynamic and agile of us. And we can also look at more strategic monthly tracking as well. We have an online portal for insights which are easily accessible and provide ad hoc support and additional consultancy where needed. So we can provide a whole range of services to our clients on market and other pricing services. Before we start, I'll just go through the methodology of the data that we'll be looking at over the next half an hour. So we have a panel of real consumers who we've recruited, and they've given us permission to run their details through the comparison sites. So every day we are running details through the big four price comparison websites and collecting the pricing data that comes back for home and motor insurance. And we've now launched into pet insurance as well. So these are real individuals, real risk profiles. Everything that we enter is what they have provided us and given us permission to use. There is a rotation and a refresh of panel members. So we're not running the same people all the time every day. There's always a day-on-day comparison of the same individuals, and anything that's non-comparable will be removed. So it really is getting a like-for-like view on a daily basis of how prices are moved. And it's a similar approach on the monthly data that we'll be looking at today. So unless the quotes are comparable for the same individuals, they will be removed from the percentage movement. So it's really a like-for-like view of price changes, not price movements that could be influenced by changes in the mix over time. So it really gives a good view of how insurers are pricing and enables us to get a good idea of different pricing strategies that we see playing out. As I mentioned, there's also data cleansing that goes on. There are a lot of unusual pricing rules which are live in general insurance in the UK, particularly in motor. So we have to make sure that what we are presenting is the result of actual price changes that have been deployed and not the effect of the process of collecting the prices. So the number of quotes somebody's running, the time of the day they may be running them, the day of the week. So anything that looks as though it may be triggering a pricing rule, we have to be very careful to take out data. We remove outliers and make sure that what we're reporting is as accurate as it can be. If you'd like some more information, then please feel free to contact me directly. You can get me on stephenkennedy@pearsonhamgroup.com, and that email will be shown at the end as well. Okay, so that is the methodology. Now, if we move on to the actual price movements that we've observed. So, what's been happening in motor insurance in Q1? So, what we've seen is a significant increase. So, there have been big increases every month of the year, and that totals over 7% movement over the past 3 months. So quite a shift in terms of prices that we're seeing for the most competitive. So that's the average of the top 5 prices quoted on the comparison sites. If we look back at 6 months, then the total movement is around 10%. So between October and March, we've seen the market competitive prices increasing by around 10%. So taking it back a bit further and looking at kind of annual increases. So if you're looking at over the past 12 months, then what we're seeing in terms of competitive prices is an increase of around 15%. So it's 14.6% movement over the past 12 months from March 22 to the end of March 23. So some quite significant movements that we're seeing there. I think it's worth looking back a bit further to add some context to what we've seen. So if we go back to the beginning of 2020, pre-pandemic, then we can see what's been happening there. So prices have been consistently dropping all the way to the end of 21, the beginning of 2022, with the general insurance pricing practices changes coming in. And then there's been some recalibration, and only recently have we started to see prices creeping up again. So actually, if we look back to the beginning of 2020, prices are only 6% higher than they were then. And I think that's a time when I was expecting certainly to see the cycle turn and prices start to increase. And there's been a lot of external influences which are impacting on claims inflation, and that has been kind of really having a massive impact more recently. If we look at individual provider movements, so this is based on some of the core products that we see. So some of the larger established brands, we have seen some kind of significant increases here, almost 40% in some cases over the course of that 12-month period. And there are kind of a few exceptions. So it's fairly consistent when we kind of single out some of those large insurer products. It's worth bearing in mind that some of these are some of the larger brands with decent sized back books. So we're seeing that kind of rebalancing having an impact here with higher kind of new business prices coming through. Looking at that in a trended view, so over the past 12 months, where we've seen the largest increases, that's been fairly consistent for those big brands. And we can see that over the course of that period, the lines are pretty straight and moving in a similar direction. Where the price increases haven't been as great, we've seen some more consistency coming in. Certainly this year, from January, prices have been moving in the same direction. So we're seeing that level of increase, similar direction, similar magnitude for all of those large providers. Okay, so that was motor. If we look at home, what have we seen there? So looking firstly at combined buildings and contents cover. So we can see there's been a massive increase of 9% over the past 3 months. So this is again looking at the most competitive prices, so the average of the top 5 that are being presented. So we've seen each month significant increases culminating in that figure of 9% in the quarter. Again, taking it slightly further back to the past 6 months, we can see prices have risen by just over 12% during that period. So we have seen each month to different degrees price increases being deployed, and the larger increases have been observed in the first 3 months of this year. Looking back over the past 12 months, so going back a little bit further, taking the annual view, actually because of some of the kind of the price reductions that were observed earlier in 2022, the year-on-year figure is only at 8.4%. So for those most competitive prices being quoted, there's an increase of 8.4%. So actually the increases that we've seen so far, plus more, have been in the past 3 months of this year. So that 9% figure is kind of just for that period, and thinking about, well, actually over 12 months, the figure is 8.4. So it really is in the most recent months that we've seen the biggest increases in terms of the prices that are being presented. Looking back again, taking a bit of a longer term view, going to January 2021, then I think it helps to create a bit of a fuller picture. So we've seen prices have increased by around 16.6% since the beginning of 2021. So if you're looking year on year, then it's kind of thrown out a bit by the reductions that we're seeing. And there are 4 clear stages that we can see in terms of price movements in home. So the first, in the post-pandemic or during the pandemic, COVID-19, we've seen prices consistently dropping, and again, potentially some acquisition strategies ahead of the FCA's general insurance pricing practices coming into effect in January 2022. And that's what we see here. So in December into January, we saw some significant increases in home caused by the JIP changes. So where renewal and new business prices are aligning, we're seeing some fairly large increases in competitive prices that are being quoted. We've then got a bit of a period of recalibration. So prices go up. Insurers now have to find their position in the new competitive environment, and also we're seeing new entrants and lower priced products entering the market. So there's a bit of recalibration, there's a bit of new product development, new market entrants coming in, causing some disruption during that kind of direct period following the initial JIP increases. And then the most recent stage is a massive increase in the cost of claim. Well, this has been going on for a while, but premiums are now having to catch up with it. So we've seen the impact of some of this on both motor and home on insurer results recently. So looking at 2022 results, we've seen some big hits on loss ratios and profitability. So there's been a need for prices to come up in recent months. Looking at some of those individual products. So again, similar to what we looked at on motor, these are some of the larger established brands. And we've seen that there have again been some significant increases. And actually there's been less consistency than we've seen in motor. So we're actually seeing some here with kind of reductions over the past 12 months, as well as some of those increases up to 38%. Again, looking at the trended view over time, we can see that where those largest increases have been observed, most of the bigger rises tend to have happened in the last 3 months. So again, a similar picture to motor, except motor was already increasing prior to this year, but we've seen a big jump up in home insurance in terms of price movements. We're also seeing a little bit more alignment this year where there's less consistency. So if we look at this is kind of the second tranche of those insurer products, we can see that since January, the direction tends to be upward for each of those. So where there's been more erratic pricing going on and less consistency, those are starting to align. So I think everybody kind of moving in the same direction so far this year. On contents only, we're seeing a similar picture. So again, each month this year, we've seen significant price increases, culminating in a figure of 6.6%. And again, so it's fairly consistent over those 3 months in the quarter. If we look back over the past 6 months, then that's a movement of just over 9%, so it's 9.1%. So there were some reductions in Q4 in October and November of last year, but they were relatively small. So they started picking up in December, and that's continued through into this year. Going back 12 months, so taking the year-on-year view, actually all of that movement in terms of price increase has been in the past 6 months. So there were some changes happening, largely driven by new market entrants and product development in May and June, and then there were some price reductions in August. So that kind of balances out. So really, where we're seeing the movement has been in the past 6 months. Again, looking back, taking a longer-term view on contents only, it's a similar view to what we see on combined cover. It tends to follow suit, but the difference that we see is in terms of that COVID-19 period, there were bigger price reductions being observed in the contents only market prior to the JIP increases coming in, and the impact of that means that over the course of that 2-year period, prices are just 6.1% higher. So right now, prices 6% higher than they were at the beginning of January 21, and a lot of that driven by this kind of negative movement in the run-up to the JIP changes taking effect in January of 2022. A similar view on individual product movements. So these are established products, and we can see that there are some extremes, but the kind of movements are kind of fairly consistently upwards. There's one outlier, and there's one outlier at either end for different reasons. If we look at that on a trended view, so where we've seen the largest increases, that tends to have happened mostly over the past 3 months, and we do see a bit less consistency on contents only, but where we are seeing that again over the past couple of months, prices have tended to jump up. So where prices have previously been a bit more erratic, then we've started to see some of those increases coming through. So what's going on at the moment in the market? What's the context? What's happening? And how's this going to impact us going forward? So I thought it worth sharing some ABI figures that they had published to give a bit of a feeling as to the underlying causes of the price increases that we've been observing certainly over the past 3 months. So we're seeing a kind of additional repair cost of vehicle repairs increasing by £71.75. We've seen the average increase for paint and material costs 16%. We've seen paint costs for repairs up 20%. We've seen 40% of work being affected in some way by parts delays, 30% increase in courtesy car costs, and 19% increase in the average price of second-hand vehicles. So all of these things are coming together to force prices up in motor, though there are similar challenges in terms of availability and costs of materials in home repair, labour shortages, supply chain issues, and also the cost of putting people up in alternative accommodation for longer than expected is causing similar challenges on home. So we have a clear idea of what's happening and the causes behind it. So it's useful again to have a look at some of the ABI figures, looking at premium movement. So we tend to look at quoted premiums. So our methodology means that we are running quotes for individuals and collecting the prices that come back, but it's useful to compare that with actual premiums that have been paid from the ABI. So I've assumed some renewal versus new business mix figures here to come up with overall market movements. And it does look like the JIP changes have had the desired effect of rebalancing the market and reducing the total amount customers paid in 2022. So we can see that overall prices paid were down just over 1% on motor and 6% on home, and making the assumption that these are the new business and renewal splits. And looking at the new business movement, so it's interesting to compare the 11% increase in paid premium with the 13.5% increase in quoted premium that we observed during that period, so from the beginning to the end of 2022. This is looking at the average paid between 2021 and 22, so it's slightly different, but it's pretty close. So I think that gives us some confidence in what we're seeing. We have seen some kind of market figures with much larger increases being reported, and I think those can be influenced to some extent by mix of business. So if you're looking at aggregator data, then that tends to be skewed by mix of business. So I think what we're getting here is a good view on how premiums are moving. It's also interesting to note the Q4 movements being reported by the ABI. So this is the Q4 movement for the end of last year, where we're seeing an 8% increase for renewal and a 7% increase for new business. I think those figures are kind of slightly mixed influence, because we do tend to see higher premium business in Q4 anyway. But what's interesting to me is the magnitude and direction of change being very, very similar for both renewal and new business. So suggesting that prices aligning are now at the point where price changes are being deployed across both channels at the same time. So we're able to monitor what we're seeing in the new business market and make some assumptions about what's flowing through in renewals. So what's the current situation? What are we seeing? We've got an alignment of new business and renewal price changes. So we're seeing those same changes flowing through. So we would expect what we're seeing at new business on our quoted premiums to be reflected at renewal invites. So these are kind of big increases that we've seen come through, particularly in the first quarter of this year. So those increases are going to be coming through for both renewals and for new business. So that's going to cause some disruption for customers. So those large price movements that we've seen for the established brands, so looking at up to almost 40% year-on-year price movement for some of those larger products, So again, these got big back books and there are significant increases going through, and that's going to impact on customer renewal invites. So customers are going to see those renewal prices increasing, and we know there's a very strong correlation between year-on-year price change and customer shopping around and switching. However, where we are currently, the price alignment is causing challenges in finding better deals at new business. So where those customers are shopping around, they're unable to find the same deals that they used to be able to. So shopping around, I think, is increasing. We've got demand picking up in the new business market, and that's likely to continue as year-on-year prices increase significantly. And also with the cost of living exacerbating the situation, customers may be more likely to shop around than they would have been previously, even with that level of price increase. So I think that there are a lot of things going on which are stimulating demand in the market. We've also seen insurer results for 2022, the impact of claims cost on profitability. We've seen some big players pull out of the motor market and other large providers reporting deteriorating loss ratios. So that's where we are. I think the question is, has enough been done to combat rising expenses? I expect that we would see further price increases, and there are already some movers so far in April, both in motor and in home. Rising costs have had a significant impact, and premiums are not yet, I think, at a sustainable level. The market is competitive though, and increasing quote demand will continue to drive down conversion rates, which could result in some tactical pricing. A lot can be lost in averages, and there may well be some segments which are attractive to some insurers due to the back versus front book dynamics, as well as expected claims behavior. So growth strategies are still in place, and where loss ratios allow, short-term profit could be invested to drive additional longer-term volume by some providers. I think it's going to remain key understanding competitor strategies to be able to better understand performance and to identify any potential opportunities. Okay, so that's the end of the presentation. I'm happy to take any questions that anyone may have if you want to log them in the chat in the last couple of minutes that we have. So where do you see prices by the end of the year? Well, I think that there is still a lot of movement and it's a competitive market. I think in the shorter term, I would expect to see further increases coming through, certainly till the middle of the year. But as I say, it is a competitive market. There are growth strategies. So if it is feasible to do so from a mobility perspective, I think we may then see a more competitive market being kind of playing out towards the latter half of the year. So potentially some reductions coming through. So between now and the end of the year, I'm not quite sure where we'll land, but I think we've still got some increases to come in certainly the short to the medium term. How do you think consumer duty would impact on pricing? I don't think it's necessarily a pricing challenge. I think what's happening now in terms of pricing has been driven by costs, and it's something that needs to be done to address insurer profitability. There are a lot of other areas which could be impacted by it, but I think in terms of pricing, that will have to be kind of managed in the way that has been managed. I think that will continue to happen over the next few months. Okay, so thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you at the next session, which will be mid-year. Feel free to contact me directly if you have any questions or would like some more information. So my email is there at stephenkennedy@pearsonhamgroup.com. We'll also be at BIBA this year. So we'll be at stand G55 on the 10th and the 11th of May. It would be great to see you there. So if you are passing by, then please pop by and say hello. Or if you'd like to have a coffee and a catch up, then get in touch with me and we can arrange to put half an hour in ahead of the event. Thank you very much. Have a good day.